RodneyABrooks.com. Today we're talking to Jeanne Thompson, Senior Vice President at Fidelity, and we're going to talk about 401ks and retirement. Welcome, Jeanne.
Thank you, Rodney. It's great to be here.
Great. So, basically, are people saving enough in their retirement plans? I know Fidelity has lots of data on that.
Yes, as a matter of fact, even many people thought when the pandemic hit that people would stop saving, but actually we've seen savings rates maintained and in some cases even increasing. There were a handful of people that had to tap into their 401ks with the CARES Act withdrawals, but the vast majority stayed the course when it comes to saving for retirement, which is a good thing.
Okay, so people, I always get mixed opinions when I ask about should people take loans from their 401ks. Now COVID was sort of an extreme case where some people had to. So what are your feelings about people? What the advantages and the disadvantages of actually borrowing from your 401k?
Yeah, that's a great question. And so I think it depends. When you're borrowing from your 401k, you're essentially borrowing from yourself. And so you do pay yourself back. And the vast majority do end up paying themselves back. Where it runs into an issue is if you take multiple loans and you always have money coming out of your 401k. In some cases, we see that people have 2 or 3 loans and it's a revolving door. In that case, it's not a good idea because you never actually keep the money invested and you're losing out on that long-term growth. And we do suggest that you have an emergency fund to avoid that. But if you have the choice between a 401k loan and a hardship out of your 401k, the loan is slightly better because you do pay it back. The hardship, not only the money comes out of your 401k, there's 10% withholding, 20% withholding, and a 10% IRS penalty. And so that money cannot get back into your 401k and has a much greater impact long term.
So what is the average balance of 401ks? I know you have a lot of data. I know you have a lot of data.
Yeah. So the average balance is just over $100,000, and that has significantly increased over time. I've been doing this a long time, and when we look back to like the market downturn 08 and 09, it was in the $50,000 to $60,000 range, and so now it's almost double that. And we've also seen savings rates increase over time. Back then it was in the 7% range, and now it's up over 8% of personal savings to the 401k. So we do see that people are more committed. I think most people realize that they don't have a pension plan and that the 401k is the primary way, in addition to Social Security, that they're going to create that retirement paycheck.
Okay. Now, the average balance, okay, is there an age? I mean, do you have balances based on age?
Yes, we do. And when we look at the average balance, it's a little bit misleading because we have new people coming in and they have a zero balance, because they're just starting out. And then we have older people that have much higher balances. So when we look at, say baby boomers, for example, they have much higher balances, ranging from the $350,000 range up to $500,000. So as you get, and the older you are, generally we see the higher average balance. Younger people, it's less than that. If you're just starting out in your 20s, maybe 10, 20,000. But we are seeing, if you look at it by age group and even tenure, the balances are much higher than that.
Okay. So what about participation? And talk about participation and what auto enroll and auto escalate means and whether that makes a difference.
So I can tell you it makes a huge difference. So participation, generally when you join a company, you have the option to join the 401k if they offer a 401k. Now, years ago, people would just have to proactively sign up, maybe in their first week or their first month of joining the company. About probably 15 years ago, they instituted something called auto enrollment. So when you join, many companies will automatically enroll you within 30 days into the 401k. And typically they'll auto enroll you at 3% of pay, 4%, 5%, up to 6%. Each company can set a different level of auto enrollment. And typically, they'll auto enroll you at 3%. And if they have a 3% match, you'll be saving at 6%. So you put in 3, the company puts in 3, and you get 6. The challenge with that is it's great to get people in the plan, but oftentimes people just forget about it and they don't increase over time. And so as you get older, as maybe your pay increases, you get cost of living increased, you want to increase your savings rate at least 1% a year to your saving up to the match, or we recommend, if you can, up to that total of 15%. So you want to make sure if you're auto-enrolled, you not only know what percent, but that you increase it over time. And the other thing is to make sure you know where your money's invested.
So what kind of tips would you give to people who are just basically overwhelmed? I know Fidelity offers some assistance, but let's talk about, you are auto enrolled, but you don't know what to invest in.
That's right. So most people, when they're auto enrolled, the company also picks a fund and defaults them into it. So typically it's a target date fund, which is invested by your age and years to retirement. And so when you're younger, they invest it more in equities. And as you age, it rebalances that amount of equities. But if you're not sure, you should just call whoever the provider is. If it's Fidelity, call us. If it's someone else, call them to find out where your money's going, to make sure that you're comfortable with it. Target dates are a great option for young people. In fact, we find the vast majority of people in their 20s and early 30s are in target dates. And as you get older, maybe you have the time, you have the skill, the will, the time, as we say, to invest on your own, then you can pick funds within the fund lineup that the company offers. But it is a good idea to know where your money's going, because oftentimes I'll hear young people thinking that their money's in just cash or a savings account, and that's not the case with a 401k.
Okay, so what kind of advice would you have for people to get them to start saving and to increase saving?
Yeah, the best advice I would say is one, if you're automatically enrolled, great, but it would be to set it up so that you increase at least 1% a year, up to that 10 to 15% savings rate. And, I typically recommend if you have like a pay adjustment or a costing of living increase that happens, say, every July, coincide it with that so that you don't actually feel the impact in your paycheck. So say you get a 1.5% increase, cost of living increase, or you get a raise, that's a great time to increase your savings rate so that in your 401k, so you don't really feel the impact to your paycheck.
Okay, but people still aren't saving enough for retirement. Is that correct?
Yes, in general, people aren't. And some of the reasons that we see that they aren't is because they have high, they may have a lot of debt payments. They have competing priorities. They're trying to save for college. They're trying to pay off their student loans. They're trying to buy a car, a house. And so it is important, to save, as much as you can without overextending yourself, because if you save too much and then you have to tap into it with withdrawals, we don't necessarily want that either. So it's really important to have a budget and to understand, how can you pay down your debt and save a little bit for retirement. The first step is really just to try to save up to the company match. If you're not doing that, you are leaving free money on the table.
Okay, now, one mistake that I found that people make is that they save only in the 401k. Now, talk about the importance of saving outside of the 401k, especially because you mentioned the emergency budget.
Yeah, so it is important to save for retirement and to get that company match. But outside of that, you do want to have a little nest egg, whether it's for an emergency or a rainy day. It could be if your car breaks down, the hot water heater, goes. You want to have some pot of money to put towards that. And so, and that can seem overwhelming because you might think, I'll never be able to have enough to make it meaningful. But if you just start with a little bit, a few bucks each week, you set it aside, over time that will grow and it will help you from taking on more debt or having to tap in. Another great thing is, if you get a tax refund, you can use some of that money to start as an emergency fund. And it just has to be a little bit every week. And so if you can find places to cut back, it'll help you from generating more debt or having to tap into that retirement plan.
Okay. And so, and kind of related is people, one of the reasons people raise their retirement savings is for college tuition. Okay, so bad idea.
Yeah, bad idea. Because you can take a loan out for college, but you can't take a loan out for your retirement. And so, if you have young kids, you think about, opening a 529 college savings plan and or talking with your kids. I know I did this with my kids to say, here's what I can contribute. If you wanted to go to a more expensive school, you're going to need to take out loans. You may need to work in college. There's only so much to go around. And depending on their major, state schools are a great option, but you really want to not only talk to your kids about the college that's the right fit, from a academic perspective, but a good financial fit, because you don't want to be saddled with those loans. And I'm sure when your kids realize what it means to have big loans, they're not going to want to be saddled. So it's a good idea to talk about the academic fit, but also the financial fit.
And what part can a financial planner play in particularly 401ks? Particularly, is that something you want to make sure somebody who is a financial planner take a look at to see if you're investing right?
Yes, a financial planner can actually help you not only figure out where to invest, but also as you get closer to retirement, how to draw that money down. When you look at your 401k, it's this big pot of money, but you actually have to take that pot and turn it into a paycheck. And one of the big mistakes people can make is withdrawing that money too fast. Many people underestimate how long they're going to live. Oftentimes you think you don't want to live until you're 95, but some of us will. And I know, Rodney, you had, I think, an aunt that was 98.
She's 100 now.
So she's 100 now,
Just
right?
turned 100, yes.
Right. I can't imagine living to 100, but there's a chance I might. And so you want to just be thoughtful about, and this is where a planner can help you, about how you take your money out of your 401k so you don't run out before you need to.
Now that's pretty important because there's so much emphasis put on saving that people give so little thought to the fact that you actually have to watch how much you take out and how you take it out. So what kind of advice you have there?
Yeah, that's right. Because this is really the generation now that's tapping into their 401ks in the retirement is really that first generation that's using their 401k to really generate that retirement paycheck. And so it is a good idea to look at your overall balance, and working with a financial planner or using some of the online tools, they can amortize that. And a general rule of thumb, some people say 3%, some people say 4%. It really depends on how old you are when you retire, how much money you have. But you don't want necessarily to be taking 5-6% out every year, because there's a good chance you'll run out of money. And you want to think about, if you have 30 years in living in retirement, it's going to go through a lot of market cycles. And if the market's down when you initially retire, you're going to eat away at your principal more than you would when it's up. So you want to make sure that you don't start too high. If you only have 5 years, if you've been in retirement for 25 years, maybe you're 85, 90, you might be able to withdraw a little bit higher, because hopefully we're not going to live well past 100. But you really do want to look at, how you're invested in retirement. You still want to beat inflation, but you also don't want to withdraw too much too soon.
What are some of the unique problems faced by women, and what are some of the numbers when it comes to women versus men, when it comes to saving for retirement?
Yeah, so when it comes to saving for retirement, we actually find that women, in many cases, are better savers. They actually save a little bit more than men do, but when it comes to investing, they actually don't take on as much risk. And not that you want to take on too much risk. And when I say risk, it's maybe investing more heavily in stocks. Then they invest a little bit less in stocks than men do. But their performance, the annual rate of return they achieve is about the same. And so women are actually doing really well when it comes to saving for retirement and investing. But the thing that women really have to think about is oftentimes women have more time out of the workforce. So they may spend more time in caregiving roles, whether that's taking time out or working part-time when they have small children and or with aging parents. And so one thing that they want to be cognizant is if they are stepping out of the workforce, when they come back in, maybe increasing that savings rate to make up for lost time, or trying to put away some money while they're out of the workforce. The other thing that is very important, and we touched on this a little bit, is that women tend to live longer than men. And so for women, you may need more money in retirement because you're going to live longer. And the ways to maybe sort of combat that is working a little bit longer, so maybe well into your 60s versus retiring earlier, especially if you took time off. So you just want to be cognizant of, if you had time out of the workforce, you do need to make up for it because you may live longer. And so one of the ways to do that is maybe work longer in your 60s and maybe early 70s, even if it's in a part-time job, to offset the time that you may have had out of the workforce and the fact that you might live longer.
Okay, so if you have like 3 tips for people when it comes to saving for retirement, what would they be?
But, oh gosh, there's so many. It's hard to choose.
Okay. Why don't you give me 5 then?
Okay, I can give you 5. One, start saving. Well, this is a combination one. The first one is start saving early and take advantage of any company match. The second is know where your money's invested and make sure you're not too conservatively invested or too aggressively invested. You want to make sure that you're right for your age and your time horizon. I would say the third is if you're changing jobs. I heard a stat over the weekend that 40% of the U.S. workforce is actively looking for a new job. So if you're out there, if you're one of those looking for a new job, make sure that you don't cash out when you're changing jobs, because you want to either roll that money into an IRA or roll it into your new 401k. The fourth one is if you're older, make sure that you take your minimum required distribution. If you don't take that in the year that you're supposed to, you could get slapped with a 50% penalty from the government. So make sure you do that. And then when you do hit retirement, make sure that, when we talked a little bit about this, that you don't draw down too much too fast. You want to make your money last.
Okay. So any final thoughts? Anything we haven't discussed you think would be important for people to know?
I think the biggest thing is that it's the slow and steady that wins the race. Saving for retirement is much more of a marathon than a sprint. And when you're young, it may look like you're not really accumulating much. But as someone who's sort of on the back nine of her career, over time, I never thought I would be able to save anything meaningful, but just that slow and steady every week, taking advantage of that match. You'll be amazed if you don't tap into it, what your 401k can do for you as you head into retirement.
Okay. Well, thank you so much. Again, we're talking to Jeanne Thompson, Senior Vice President at Fidelity. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Ronnie. It's a pleasure.